morning, fellow Toastmasters. When my boys were younger, I used to read them bedtime stories. And I'd like to share with you this morning one of my favorite stories of all that I read them at night. It's called The Rabbi's Gift. Originally, it was a story by M. Scott Peck, author of The Road Less Traveled. Except I'm going to modify it a little bit, as storytellers always do. It concerned a monastery in the 19th century in Europe that had fallen upon hard times. Once a center for spirituality and enlightenment, it had given way to secularism and materialism, material gain, to the point where it was so decrepit and old that all the monks were aging and they were thinking about having to close their doors. Now, in desperation to keep the monastery open, the abbot of the monastery went around to everyone he could think of to see if he could possibly save his dying order. But no one could help. Finally, in desperation, one night, he went to visit a rabbi. Now, this may sound strange, but this rabbi was renowned throughout the region for being extremely wise, and some said he even possessed psychic ability. So the abbot went and knocked on his door, and as the rabbi opened it, he greeted him with a warm hug and invited him in. They shared a couple of glasses of wine and talked about this and that. And finally, the abbot got around to the purpose of his visit and explained the dire situation at the monastery. After mulling the situation over for quite some time, the rabbi said, "I'm sorry, I cannot think of a single thing that you haven't already thought of. I wish I could help, but I can't." The abbot bowed his head, thanked the rabbi very much for inviting him in and the wonderful conversation. And as I was getting up to leave, he said, "However, I do feel badly because I have failed in my mission. My goal was to find some way to save the monastery, and in this I have failed." The rabbi said, "I'm sorry, I wish I could help you. I can think of nothing." And just as the abbot was leaving, the rabbi said, "However, I have a feeling that the Messiah may be among you." They bid good night. The abbot returned to the monastery, and as he was walking along the path, he started thinking about what the rabbi had said. The Messiah may be among you. Now, who could that be? Did he actually mean that the Messiah may be one of the people in the monastery, one of the monks? And if so, who could it be? After some deliberation, he finally decided it would have to be Brother Mark, because Brother Mark was always happy and in good spirits. And if he were the Messiah, he would naturally be in good spirits, because the Messiah would be the embodiment of spirituality and happiness. And so the next time he saw Brother Mark, he bowed and smiled courteously, and Brother Mark bowed and smiled courteously back. And every time he met the brother after that, the two bowed and smiled towards each other. Well, a few days later, the abbot was thinking again, and he thought, perhaps it's Brother John, because Brother John is an extremely enlightened individual. He knows everything about the Scriptures. And of course, if he were the Messiah, he would know everything about the Scriptures. And so the next time he saw Brother John, he also bowed and smiled. And Brother John returned the smile and the bow. And of course he thought a little bit more, as we often do, and he decided, I wonder if it could be Brother Anselm. Now, Brother Anselm was extremely unlikely to be the Messiah because he was crotchety and old and disagreed with everyone. He was the least liked of all the people at the monastery. But whenever they got into an argument, Brother Anselm insisted that he was right. But come to think of it, the abbot thought, he always was right. And if he were the Messiah, then he surely would be right because he knows everything. And so the next time he passed Brother Anselm in the hallway, he smiled and bowed. Now, Brother Anselm, of course, didn't notice it at first because he was lost in his thoughts. But he looked up and saw the abbot smiling, and he bowed and smiled. And little by little, this became infectious until everyone in the monastery began smiling and bowing to one another. Now, it so happened that the monastery, even though it had fallen upon hard times, was nevertheless situated in a very beautiful area. And people still came up to visit, picnic, throw the ball, go for walks around the grounds. And they couldn't help but notice the difference in the monks as they strolled around the grounds, the warmth they embodied, the cheerfulness, the good spirits. And they felt so good when they left that they came back. And when they came back, they brought their friends. And their friends brought more friends, and more friends. Until pretty soon the monastery itself was crowded with people on the weekends. And the monks were engaged in conversation, so much so that they couldn't handle all the questions and they started holding classes. And on the weekends when the services were held, there was standing room only. It wasn't long after that until some of the younger members that were coming to visit the monastery inquired about joining the order. First one, and then another, and then another, and pretty soon new monks entered the order. And so on and so on and so on. It went for years until finally the monastery became once again the center of spirituality and enlightenment, surpassing even its reputation of years before. Now, of course, after all this time, the abbot had long since forgotten about his visit with the rabbi. But one night, when he was strolling around the grounds, he noticed a shadow passing through the trees, and he turned to look, and it was the rabbi. And he smiled and bowed as he now did for everyone. And the rabbi bowed and smiled likewise, and then disappeared once more into the forest.